don't think I'm ever gonna get used to talking to this thing. So I wasn't planning on posting a progress report or an update today. I was actually planning on going through these old sketchbooks I have right here because I wanted to give you a sense of, where I started from, the kind of drawings I used to do, and how much I learned in this period of time. So this is roughly from 2018 to 2021, halfway through 2021, with a couple sprinkled in from 22, 23. But this was when I was really, really drawing. But yesterday was day 30 of my drawing. And I figured for day 30, I'd do something fun, give myself a little bit of a challenge. And honestly, I was so shocked by the results, I felt like I should make a quick little video about it and post it. So I guess we can call this a mini progress report, a mini update. In fact, I thought it was gonna take me longer to get to this point than I did. So I'm actually just surprised that I was able to get back to where I used to be, if not slightly better, in 30 days. I thought it was gonna take 3 to 6 months. But I guess with some focused learning, that drawing muscle memory can come back pretty quick. The main goal of this challenge was to create a scene with one person doing something. And the first rule is that I'm allowed to use a photo reference of a scene, but no person can be in the photo. By this, I mean I can have an idea of the structures in the scene, but I have to implement the anatomy and the people within the scene, or I guess the person in the scene. And the second rule, I cannot use the angle that comes from the photo reference. I have to use a different angle and make that with my head. And the third rule, because I want this to be fun, is I can use pencil and I can erase as many times as I want and redraw. I know it's been a very big focal point of my journey, is learning to have good line work and line commitment, but I feel like I'm really still just not at that point. So I'm gonna allow myself to erase and redraw as much as I want. And finally, I wanna do this all within a 2-hour time limit. And with that established, let's get straight into the drawing. Okay, so to keep it simple, the first thing that I did was I took a photo of my desk. I figured the easiest way to get into this would just be draw myself sitting at my desk. And once I had my reference, I sat down and I got to work. So the first thing that I wanted to do was draw the reference that I had on hand. Maybe do like a little thumbnail of it, Really just see what kind of shapes I have in this space that I'm already familiar with. So there's the many rectangles and blocks of my desk and my sketchbook and my monitor, but I still wasn't exactly sure what other angle I wanted to draw from. So I was really just working with the shapes to see what I could do. After about 15, 20 minutes of getting a sense of the space, I decided to take the easy route and do a top-down version of the drawing. And after about 5 minutes of trying to do that, I got really bored, so I switched and decided I'm gonna do a low angle from the same side that the reference was on. So not too difficult, but it definitely requires a lot of perspective, which is a lot more fun to me. Okay, so considering I haven't done any perspective drawing in, 3, 4, 5 years, there were two main things I was really worried about and really considering. So the first thing I'm worried about is the intensity of the angle. How much foreshortening will I need? What part of the scene can I see? What can I not see? And the second thing I'm worried about is the width of the lens. So if you look at my drawing, you can see this tiny, tiny camera that I drew onto the thumbnail, and that's where my reference point is. And if you've ever worked with cameras, you know that a wider lens means you get more of the scene in the photo. And because I'm drawing so close to my subject, I need a wider lens for my drawing. Now, this really isn't a problem conceptually, but it does a lot of weird stuff to your image when you get closer to the edges. So, jumping into the main drawing, the first thing I did was try to establish a perspective. And normally when I try to establish a perspective, I base everything off the first thing that I put down. Because this is meant to be a challenge, and I typically don't do it anyway, there's no grid lines, no reference lines, no vanishing points, nothing like that. So, originally I decided to use the stool as my reference point because my imaginary camera on that low angle has it front and center. And as soon as I started drawing, I ran into my biggest problem, my biggest op: ellipses. Perfect ellipses. Ellipses? Ellipse? I don't know. Drawing a good ellipse is really hard. Definitely really hard for me. And now I had to draw 3 of them in varying sizes, all in varying angles, and make them look seamless between each other. And this was tough. It took me many, many redraws and probably about 40 minutes of the overall drawing process before I decided it was good enough to move on to the next thing. Now, the ellipses give a decent idea of depth, but to really sell it, the legs give the best depth and really show how extreme the width of my lens is. You can see this by how small the back leg is and how big the front leg is and where each of them sit on the floor. And so after putting the legs on and establishing that depth, I moved on to the body. And because I was actively sitting in the chair, I just tried to imagine what the little camera in the corner looked like staring up at me. And for me, in my head, it's easier to draw from a point that's already been established. So the first thing I did was I put a butt in the chair and I added a leg to see how the perspective would work out. And man, it was bad. This is where my practice of anatomy started to show and just how little practice I've actually had. Like, the stool looked pretty good, but then on top you got this weird one-legged thing just sitting there at a different angle, and it didn't make any sense. And I mean, I was really struggling at this point. You know, I couldn't get things to make sense visually. The angle was off, I couldn't get the proportions to make any sense, I couldn't figure out where anything went. So after 25-ish minutes, I had to just take a minute and sit there and think without drawing. I ended up just putting my head down and staring at the floor, trying to imagine the perspective that the camera would have of me, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And then out of the corner of my eye, between my arm and my thigh, I could see the exact spot where I had placed the imaginary camera. And as soon as I realized that, everything became much more clear. You know, it was crazy. Like, I could see perfectly, like, the underside of my arm, the foreshortening of my bicep. I could see the underside of my chin, the space between my hip and my elbow or my tricep, how high my hip is relative to the desk, even the backside leg, I could see it shrinking off in the distance. Now, because I looked down at the floor and I saw that and it helped me, I feel like it's not authentically how I planned to do this, but I don't really consider it cheating considering I didn't get up and look at the angle or take a photo reference or anything like that. I still feel like I did the majority of what I was planning to do. And it made it so much easier to actually go in and draw all these things that I was thinking of. You know, it just gave me such a clear image that instead of spending 25 minutes struggling with drawing the upper body and getting the angle correct, it took me 10 minutes to really get a decent outline of all of this. And there were sections in there where I wasn't fully sure on how things fell, so I had to draw some boxes and some basic shapes to try and just get a general idea of what was going on, specifically for the shoulders and the hips on the chair. But as I was getting into it and I was really getting the flow of everything, I realized that my camera had stopped recording because it has a 2-hour time limit, which meant my time was up. I had gone past my 2 hours and I didn't finish it. But because I was so logged in and so focused, I turned the camera back on and I kept going. So after I turned the camera back on, I tried to be quick about it, didn't add too much detail, just get a general idea of the shapes for everything. And after about 2 hours and 20 minutes, I got this. I think it's pretty good, honestly. Like, I'm genuinely surprised by how well I was able to put this together, mostly from imagination as well. I've heard that taking a reference and drawing it from a different angle can be really helpful, and I think I'm gonna continue doing this as a practice and not as a project anymore. But this was very useful for me, and it genuinely surprised me how well it came out. And just to touch on a few things with this drawing, I've never studied any kind of perspective. The only time that I've ever studied perspective was in a middle school art class where they taught me basic 1-point and 2-point perspective. And that's really it. So I have no idea how accurate this really is when it comes to wider angle drawings. Specifically, when you look at the edges of the drawings, you can see how the lines curve and wrap around the center. This is really just something I picked up playing around with 360 cameras and, you know, using the 0.5 lens on the iPhone. And yeah, I mean, I can't explain how genuinely surprised I am that I was able to do this. You know, it took me longer than I wanted it to, and I don't think it's the greatest thing. There's not a whole bunch of detail, but the perspective, at least in my eyes, looks fairly decent. And the craziest part about this isn't even the only example of this experience that I've had over the last 2-3 weeks since I posted the second update video. In fact, going through this whole process has kind of given me the drawing obsession again, and documenting it has been a huge part of how much fun I'm having. I've been thinking about it so much, in fact, that I've decided to change the way I'm doing this channel. It's not concrete just yet, but I'm gonna give it a shot and see how it goes. Now, the main purpose of this channel when I created it was to create an entertaining space where I could teach myself how to draw while also learning how to film and edit as a side effect of that documentation process. You know, it was supposed to be like a low effort, fun project where I could learn a couple things over a period of time and just have fun. And now, I mean, the learning and having fun part aren't gonna change, but I think the low effort part is gonna be bumped up a little bit because I'm enjoying this whole process so much. I wanna lean a little more into it. You know, I wanna create some more stuff. I wanna film and edit and draw more and more. For example, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but Originally, I was gonna post a video about all of these sketchbooks right here, and I just really wanted to get this one out instead. So this is gonna be coming next week. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. If you wanna see that sketchbook video next week, hit subscribe, or if you just wanna follow my art journey, hit subscribe as well. If you liked the video, leave a like, and if you have any advice for me on how I could improve my art, leave it down in the comments.